Tashidale, welcome to the AWAM Tibetan Buddhist Institute and our class for today, the Heart Essence of Tibetan Buddhism. Today we are looking at the Four Immeasurables. But before we actually start, let's begin by taking a deep breath and then very slowly let it out 3 times. So we do that to help calm our mind, our body into deep peace. So now we take a short refuge prayer. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent in order to enable all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent in order to enable all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent in order to enable all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. So today, the Four Immeasurables, as I mentioned, we introduced the Four Immeasurables a little bit earlier. In chapter 8, we have lovingkindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So those are considered to be immeasurable because there are no limits to their expression. In the sutras, the Buddha teaches that these teachings will bring liberation. And so these are among the most important of all practices in Buddhism. There are numerous variations of these practices. I have selected the examples that are direct and straightforward among those that I have been taught. Sharing those with you today. So the first one is loving kindness. We now turn to the first of those, and having established confidence that all beings want happiness and not suffering, we now focus on loving kindness or metta meditation. In Buddhism, the loving kindness is the wish that all beings have happiness, the ultimate happiness in particular, liberation, and its causes. Ultimate happiness is the ideal, but of course we also wish that they have relative happiness as well, the things going on every day in our lives. So to the extent that it is not harmful to them or to others in some way. This practice focuses on growing our feeling of loving kindness for all beings, whether human, animal, a bird, reptile, a fish, or insect, or any other form. So the Buddha said that this is the practice that is most important. So we begin the actual beginning practice of loving kindness or metta. And as we typically do, we talked about this before, that we do the practice twice daily for a week or once daily for 3 weeks. Now you can divide these up, especially we're going to be going through all 4 of these today. Each can be treated as a separate independent practice, or you can practice them sequentially all the way through one after the other as a part of that. And they're very closely related, which makes that fairly practical to do depending on what time you have available. So the practice here is one where we set our intention first, as we've done in other previous practices. I do this for the benefit of all sentient beings or other personal intention that you may have. And then we recite the refuge, which we have already done. And so then for the practice of loving kindness, settle into stillness of body, speech, and mind, mentally calm, and then think of someone you love and bring that feeling into your heart. So it's not the image or anything like that, but the feeling of that. And then focus on it and let it grow stronger and stronger. And then as it grows, it expands throughout your body, filling it entirely. So soon, you can no longer contain it. It just gets too big, too strong. It radiates out to others that are nearby. And then those in the intermediate surroundings beyond that. And those in the neighborhood, the city, the state, the country, and even the globe itself. All sentient beings in and around the entire planet. All animate beings. This too becomes so strong that then it radiates even further through the solar system, and then through the galaxy and the universe, and all universes, and across all time and space. We might even say that it continues beyond that to all universes. And some scientists think there are multiple universes. We don't really know, but it might be possible. So we continue meditating in this state until you feel confidence in this loving kindness for all. And then rest naturally in this confidence without thoughts. Just peace. Let go, let be, and then sit in this mental calm for as long as you can. And so that's the basic practice for the loving kindness. So now we're going to go on to the second one, which is compassion. And the practice here is referred to as Tonglen. So the next of the four immeasurables then is based on our mutual interdependence with others. In Buddhism, compassion is the wish that all sentient beings not have suffering or its causes. It complements loving kindness so that together we do not want beings to suffer, and we do want them to have happiness. No bad, all good. We apply these principles in all of our actions, habituating our behavior in this way until it becomes natural. We wouldn't even think of doing it any other way. It changes our worldview. According to the Dalai Lama, quote, "The first beneficiary of compassion is always oneself." When compassion or warm-heartedness arises in us, our focus shifts away from our own narrow self-interest, and it is as if we open an inner door. It reduces fear, boosts confidence, and brings us inner strength. By reducing distrust, it opens us to others and brings us to a sense of connection to others and a sense of purpose and meaning in life. This next practice combines loving kindness and compassion and is called Tonglen, giving and taking. It can be done whenever you see discontent or suffering. So we settle first into stillness of body, speech, and mind, as we have and will continue to do in these practices. Think of someone you know who is suffering, whether due to pain, mental anguish, or some other form, and put yourself in their place. Feel their suffering. At the same time, know that they do not want this suffering. They just want they just want it to go away. Imagine their suffering as a thick black cloud clogging their mind. Breathe it in and down to your heart, where it instantly is transformed into pure, warm, white light. Breathe in and out, sending it back to them as loving kindness and compassion to relieve their suffering. So repeat it over and over with each breath until you feel that they are no longer suffering. If you have time, continue with another being and so forth. Now, some people, when they do this, if they're breathing in all this dark, sticky, black stuff, that could be harmful to themselves. But the reality is that we transform that. And that's the power that we have that comes from doing this kind of a practice. And we transform all that negative stuff. Here we're focusing on others, but actually it helps it for ourselves as well. So at the end of the session, again, we just relax, we let go, let be, in mental and physical stillness as long as you can. So that's the Tonglen practice of compassion for all beings. So now we go on to the third of our practices in the four is joy, or in some cases it's referred to as a slightly different form. Not saying it on here, but maybe it'll come to me in a minute. So here, some think of it as sympathetic joy, not just joy, but sympathetic kind of joy. So there are two forms of this. There's a relative and an ultimate, or some would say an inner and an outer. At the first case, we are indeed sympathetic to the joy of someone else, whether they graduated from school, maybe they got a new job or a promotion on their job, or maybe they won a big game, or whatever success that they may have had. We are not jealous or envious of their joy, only sympathetic. The second form relates to liberation itself. It is the wish that all beings achieve liberation. It is often helpful to start with the first form and then move on to the second. So somebody you know that you have experience with and recognizing their excitement or happiness with having achieved something, and then expanding that out beyond just one individual into the greater nature of all sentient beings as a part of that. So the practice here is to settle again into stillness of body, speech, and mind. Think of someone you know who has recently experienced some form of success that also made you feel good for them. That's very helpful as a part of this. Reflect on their happiness as having done so, and then feel your own sympathy for their experience. Let the feeling grow until it is strong, and then think of another, and then another. However many that you can. Then move to someone before that you did not feel quite so good at their success. So this is a little more challenging oftentimes. And then finish with someone towards whom you may have felt a bit of jealousy or envy at their success. Continue working with those until you feel a strong sense of sympathetic joy for their success. And then switch in the wish for these things, these beings to attain liberation. Imagine them in a state of inner peace and happiness. Continue with this contemplation for each of those for whom you did the first part of the practice, and then you gain confidence in your feeling of joy for them and all sentient beings who will benefit from their success. So then conclude by resting naturally in this confidence without thoughts. Just let go and let be. Sit in stillness as long as you can. So that is the conclusion of that section of the practice. So now we move into the fourth one of these four immeasurables, equanimity. Now, equanimity as a word has a couple of different meanings, usages. So it can mean a form of mental calm, but it can also be that we treat every being equally. So an equal kind of equanimity, if you will. And that is the focus of it here. So we don't have favorites or those we reject or ignore as a part of that. As a bodhisattva, we wish every being to achieve liberation. One of the ways that the Buddha stresses this point is stating that with countless reincarnations. Okay, so in the Buddhist tradition, we think that there's been countless numbers of reincarnations getting us to this life. And whether you believe that literally or not doesn't really matter so much as just the idea of the strength of this commitment. So in this case, under that idea of infinite number, we have undoubtedly had every other sentient being as our mother in some previous life. You'll often hear lamas talk about that. If by chance you have doubts about the literal reincarnation, consider it as a metaphor, which can be just as effective. So in either case, when we think that every being has been our mother, assuming that you had a loving relationship, that's another one that comes up sometimes, with your mother. Otherwise, you might substitute another being with whom you have had a loving relationship. So if things weren't that great with your mother, then, and that does happen, we hear about it fairly regularly, and so then you want to find somebody else, because it's very important that it is someone that you recognize as having a loving relationship. So then it changes the way that we think about and treat other sentient beings. That's very important. We're training our mind, changing the way that we look at, understand, and experience these things. This includes not only humans, but as we mentioned before, all forms of beings, such as animals, birds, fish, and so forth. Alternately, you can consider every sentient being as being a Buddha. We've talked about every being has Buddha nature. And so in essence, even though they may not be acting like we consider to be a valid Buddha, they have that being existent in themselves. So even though they may not realize that due to their own obscurations and habitual tendencies, how does this make you feel when you try to swat a mosquito? Do you really want to kill a Buddha? Or what about the insects splattered across your windshield on a drive or a road trip, something like that? Hopefully that was not intended, but do you feel some regret at having done that? Or have you been indifferent about it? As I said, the practice changes the way that we see the world. We begin to recognize that some things that normally maybe we wouldn't even think about, that insect striking the windshield, but you begin to think about it and feel badly about the fact that that happened to them. So what is the actual practice for equanimity? Besides contemplating the idea of equanimity, there are two practices frequently used for this purpose. One is called equalizing self and other, and the second is exchanging self and other. So here they are incorporated into one practice session, so they're done sequentially, but they may be done separately if you prefer. So the first one, equalizing self and other. We settle into stillness of body, speech, and mind, as before. Out of that stillness, we think how you and all other sentient beings want happiness and peace. Through beginningless lifetimes, there's that idea, principle, we have all been struck in samsara because of our fundamental ignorance and resulting focus on ourselves. So almost everyone focuses on themselves. It's very rare that somebody doesn't. However, we can get to the point where we're not completely focused on ourselves. Maybe once in a while we are, but we're really focused more and more on others. And that is the goal here. That's what we're working toward, is to be able to get to the point that our primary focus is on others, even though from time to time we may think about ourselves a little bit. That's part of life. So, we have all been struck by samsara because of our fundamental ignorance and the resulting focus on ourselves. I want peace and happiness. They want peace and happiness. We are all equal in this regard. Think specifically of one particular individual, someone you are close to is helpful. Feel that is what that is like for them. Then think of another and another. Each wants peace and happiness. When you have exhausted your list of individuals, think of groups of people that you don't know. Neighbors, community members, state residents, country residents, global residents. I'm sure that there's a lot of those 6 billion people out there that you don't know yet. So we can focus on those, but focus on them as groups, if you will. And then another level is to think about any enemies that you may have, or persons that you dislike or disagree with for any reason at all. They too want happiness and peace. Think of those enemies you know personally, those you know but do not know personally, those who are members of groups in which you disagree or dislike, and so forth. There's lots of those different opportunities there. Continue until you are confident in knowing that all want happiness and peace and do not want suffering. So here's the second practice, the exchanging self and others. So it takes what we were already doing and pushes the limit a little bit more. So we repeat this pattern of thought, but actually put yourself in the place of another person or imagine yourself as a member of that group. Walk in their shoes as they walk in yours. So you're imagining that you've traded back and forth. So you're walking in theirs, they're walking in yours. Doesn't literally mean shoes, but in their environment, their experience, and so forth. So you do know. And may they too have this precious opportunity for peace and happiness. And again, continue until you are confident in knowing that all beings want happiness and peace and do not want suffering. The exact things that they want as a part of that may vary, but ultimately within us, we all want that. And then relax naturally again into that mental calm, peace, and contentment in confidence without thoughts. Let go, let be. And then sit in the stillness for as long as you can. And now, having completed all 4 of these, assuming that you're doing them in that sequence, we now include the dedications. So by the merit of this practice, may I attain liberation for the benefit of all sentient beings. 3 times. And then post-meditation, throughout the day, look for opportunities to reflect on your wish for the liberation of every being, no matter who or what they are, and continue to remain mindful of that, all in terms of what you think, what you say, what you do. Think, say, or do. So those are the practices here for this week. And as I have mentioned, you can do one at a time. You can do them as a total sequence of all 4 sets, if you like. A couple of them are multiple sets in and of themselves. But those are the practices. You don't have to spend a great deal of time doing these kind of things, but just open up your window, so to speak, the way that you look at things, at people, and so forth as a part of that. So next week we'll talk about wisdom again, this time Vipassana, but in a different way than what we looked at it previously. Also, if you have questions, please feel free to email me, and I will either try to answer your questions at the next of our sessions or answer it directly if I think it's something that's more personal. So in the meantime, abide softly and deeply with pure awareness, loving kindness, and compassion for all beings, always and always. And pray for peace.